Today I'm joined by Jules Haines. Jules is the founder and director of the award-winning Haines Collection, which is a D2C platform selling surplus interiors stock that would otherwise go to waste. So welcome, Jules.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. I've been really looking forward to speaking to you and finding out more about yourself and your business. So look, tell us a bit more about Haines Collection.
Well, I started the business 5 years ago. So our core mission is to help reduce waste in the interiors industry. And we do that through our website, hainescollection.co.uk, and luxury interiors brands use us as their resale platform to rehome any surplus. So it could be a few meters of textiles, it could be wallpaper, it could be ex-display cushions. But the fun bit for you and I is that it's around half the original retail price. And for them, they are able to make sure that none of their products ends up in landfill. So we have now over 3,000 products on our website and work with over 150 interior design brands, which is really exciting.
Oh, fantastic. So yeah, a great thing there. So, obviously you've created that business, but around sustainability and the environment as well. So that ticks a number of boxes there. So um so what made you start that business up, Jules?
Well, I've always worked, funny enough, it's one of those things that you actually look back in your career path or your life path and you work out why you are where you are today, and you're like, oh, that's why that happened, that's why that happened. So funny enough, I started my career working for Cancer Research UK, so doing marketing, which I guess I still do, I've always done, but I really loved being part of a sort of cause driven brand, and everyone around you being really passionate. My other real passion was actually interiors, so then I ended up, after 5 years, moving to work for a small textile designer. And that's where I learned firsthand about the amount of waste that there is in the industry. And it was just, really tiny design house. But when you're doing printing, when you're doing just the beginning, trying to get the color right, all the strike offs, and then there's all these other sort of bits and bobs when you're doing upholstery or making curtains. There's pieces that come off that nobody really wants or knows what to do with. And I was the employee that would head home on the tube in London with bagfuls of fabric remnants, thinking, oh, I'm sure I can do something. They can't be thrown away. It's too beautiful and lovely printed linen. So I think that's probably where the passion for it came from. And then it wasn't until there was actually a pop-up shop in the high street in the town where I live in Tunbridge Wells. And I came across somebody who was selling off fabric. And for him, they were the leftover pieces. So his clients were really high-end clients that didn't want any of the 1.5 meters left over from making some silk curtains, etc. And then he was the one that explained to me, just by a chance conversation, how this was a real problem for the industry, and that he found it hard to find the time to even do a pop-up shop. It was expensive. He had to be there, his customers, etc. So I obviously bought some fabric because it was lovely and it was cheap. But then I thought, that's crazy. In the fashion industry, they've sorted it out, to a degree. So they've created resale platforms so that fashion fabrics and clothing don't go to waste. But we haven't, it's never talked about in the interiors industry. And since starting the business, I've actually found lots of information. I mean, I wish there was more, but there's a report that analysed the textile waste in UK landfill, and it came out that 42% of textile waste in UK landfills is actually from homeware, and so that's nearly half. And we're so aware of fashion textile waste, we've got to be careful, fast fashion, things like that, but actually exactly the same thing is going on in the interiors industry. There are fast homeware, and particularly the throwaway mentality of people just don't really recycle or repair soft furnishings in the way that you might think about, or that you probably more recently think about for fashion. So that's a sort of interesting campaign that I've started as well, to raise awareness of that waste.
Okay, and so was being a business owner something that when you were at school or university, what was being a business owner something that you wanted to do, or has it just grown through that process that you've just described?
Yeah, I think again, I didn't really think about it as this is what I want to do. But looking back, at university, I used to get my sewing machine out and make embroidered handbags. I was always trying to make something and do something. I guess, I'm sort of naturally quite creative, but also I think I like the excitement and potentially the control freak in me, which applies to not all parts of my life. I'm quite messy and hectic, but when it comes to that, I think I was destined. I think I am an entrepreneur, and I was destined to be one. I just didn't realize it.
And um, and actually, what would you how would you describe an entrepreneur? How would you, what words would you use to describe an entrepreneur?
I think somebody who's resilient. I think that's the main thing. I think somebody who's passionate. I think you have to be a good communicator if you want to work within a team. Obviously, maybe that doesn't apply to all services, but if you want to grow a team, you have to be able to communicate what you're doing and why it's important that you're doing it. And for me, something that was always important was building a trusted brand. I felt that was, and still feel that that's the foundations to a successful business. Actually, I say that, it's not like I'm sort of taking over the world quite yet, but I think that having a trusted brand is really, really important. So to be able to communicate why a consumer or another business should trust you is important.
Yeah, no, I think all valid points. I was writing those down as you were saying them to, be resilient, passionate, great communicator. Um, but as you say, but that trusted brand, and I think not everybody sort of thinks about their business as having a brand. It's well, we've got a business, but I like the way you describe that, because we often think, of a brand, and we think of, the big brands, whether it be, in sportswear like Nike or Adidas and those sort of things. But actually, a brand is actually what you sort of said there, or to me it is, Jules, which is, what do we stand for? What are our values? How do we communicate those things? And I guess that's the marketing side of you coming through there, is it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's also quite interested in like the psychology behind it. Like exactly as you said, it could even be like a color, like, you'd be really surprised if you analyze people's first thoughts when they look for a brand, or even if you're rebranding yourself or something and you go, oh no, we can't have that green, it's like an Asda green. There's lots of little things that evoke a feeling or an association, and brands are everywhere and they're so important. And I just think if you can evoke a feeling in your brand, then you're going to be much more rememberable. It's a bit like the first time you hear about anything, you were like, oh, I remember when I first heard that song and I was outside on the beach, or, it's anything that you can connect with that part of somebody's brain makes you memorable. And then if you can also be trustworthy at the same time, then hopefully that's a recipe, for strong foundations for growth.
But I agree. Two key things there: be memorable and be trustworthy. To create a business, to grow a business. So, what's been one of the biggest challenges that you've faced as a business owner, Jules? In those 5 years of setting up your business.
Yeah, I think, well, two really. At the beginning, it was getting people to understand what we did, because we still are the only people doing what we're doing, talking about interiors textile waste, still the only people really talking about it. So being, I guess you could sort of call it a pioneer, it is hard work. And somebody, I think because I'm quite a visual person, but somebody once talked about, forging a new path is like walking through the jungle and cutting down the vines and the trees in front of you. Like, it's really hard work. But that's the whole, that's the essence of forging your own path, and it's really rewarding, and you want to be that trailblazer. that's a good thing. So expect, and that's kind of where I touched on resilience. I think a lot of that continues to play out day to day, or even part of the bigger brand growth. And I think the other thing that is constantly a challenge is we've never had any investment. We've always been bootstrapped, and part of me quite likes the challenge of that, but also sometimes it's frustrating and a bit scary at the same time. And so for me, and I've never had a business before, so for me it's understanding when it's time to grow, when it's time to take calculated risks, and when it's time to pull back as well, depending on what's going on in the world, or just what's going on internally as well. It's this sort of weird juggle, but I think what really motivates me is the mission and being lucky enough to do something that I'm passionate about.
How important is that, do you think, with for a business owner to do something that they're passionate about?
I think if you can, I know it does feel like a luxury to be doing something that you're passionate about. I think if you can tap into that, then I think you're always going to feel fulfilled. Even if my business fails, I know that I've done something that I care about, and that made a difference, even if it made a difference for 5 years, even if I think, and maybe I'm just a passionate person and that's something that's important to me, full stop. But for me, I think if you can tap into what helps you wake up every day, then hopefully you can't go too far wrong in life in general.
I think the two words that you've mentioned are resilience and passion, and I think they go hand in hand, don't they? Because I think if you're passionate about something, I think you've naturally got more resilience, because if you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, I really can't be bothered to do this or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you're passionate about it, it lights that fire. If you're not passionate about it, it's more of an effort to actually do. So
yeah. And I think it helps the communication part. I think if you're passionate about it, you talk passionately, and you're not putting it on. It's so natural to you. And it's interesting. So obviously from the marketing side of me and social media and stuff, if you're watching, let's say, a video on LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok, if somebody's there and they're going, oh my goodness, this is so amazing, I'm so into it, you're like, oh, okay, well, what is it? Maybe I need to be into it as well. Whereas if you get somebody who isn't passionate, then it can fall on deaf ears. So I think as well that if you're passionate, it leaks out into everything you do, and then it leaks out into the people who care. And then the dream, I feel, is for your customers to then be the people who pass on the message and be your brand champions without you asking them. And they're like, I would like to imagine that our customers are like, oh, look at this cool fabric that we bought. And can you believe that someone didn't want it? There was only 2 meters left and it could have been thrown away. But, and then they start telling your story. And then that's when you have that organic growth, which is so valuable. And word of mouth is just the best way to grow.
Really, yeah, creating those raving fans that just want to tell everybody about you and your business, and for whatever reason that is, like, for the reasons that you said, or the reasons that they got great service, or they, you want people, as you say, to tell your story. So if you could wave a magic wand and solve one challenge right now, what would it be?
Would probably be the money challenge.
Okay.
And then, maybe that, and that is something that I keep thinking about, going out for investment or something like that. I think for us, but also I have to be careful because I'm an ideas person and I get excited about new ideas. There's part of me that thinks it's quite good to be held back by not having money. There's a bit of me that's like, you have to just analyze and think so hard. But I'm now, in a position where I'm really ready to go down that route, and I've got some ideas, and I'm feeling confident and brave. So for me, it would be the funding side.
Sounds exciting though. Sounds like you've got an exciting time ahead of you there. So
Yeah, hopefully.
what what have you learned about yourself during those 5 years? You know, yourself as because you know being an employee to being a business owner is very different, and you learn things in the way about about yourself, etc. What would you say the biggest thing is you've learned about yourself on that journey?
I think I remember really well actually when I was about to hire my first employee, I was worried about that transition. Like I'm just in general, I'm prepared to work hard and but I never saw myself as a leader. Like I referred to myself as a worker ant. Like I'm the person who's happy to follow the line and it's something I still struggle with now is being really confident with my opinions to say them out loud. I think I'm really used to following in line with other people. So I guess I've surprised myself that I can lead and what I have to say is important. And it's not always the person who's shouting the loudest. It can be the person who won't shout the loudest, but has still got something to say that is equally as valid as the next person.
And that's from my perspective, Jules, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because like what you've sort of said on here is about being an entrepreneur. That's a that's a and you talked about being a trailblazer in your industry and setting up a business and this sort of thing. So you've certainly overcome that sort of thing of being like behind or following all that work around, because you've certainly grabbed those things and those opportunities and said, no, actually I'm going to make this happen. So yeah, it's interesting that that was something that you've really had to sort of focus on. And was there anything in particular that you think that you did that helped you to learn the skills that you needed to learn to be a leader, to be to have employees and lead them? Was there anything that
I think,
comes to mind?
yeah, I think quite often what I find is I can't quite find what I want, so I work out how to make it myself. So I guess I did that with the business, but more recently, it was about a year ago, I felt it hard to find anyone to talk about what I'm doing and create a sort of group or anything. So I started just between actually one person that I knew. I said, look, we're about the same stage as business. I find it hard being a business owner on my own. I don't have a partner, which I constantly think, I wish I had a partner. And then I hear of stories of other partners and they've fallen out or their partner wants to leave and, things like that. And then I'm like, oh, I'm really glad I'm doing this on my own. But it can be really lonely. So I think analyzing anything that you're struggling with and finding a solution and putting in the hours and the time to try and find a solution. And then if you can't find a solution or a group or whatever, start your own. So I started with this other entrepreneur. I said, look, should we find another person? You get one person, I'll get one person, and we'll have monthly catch-ups. And we now do that. And it's really nice. And sometimes we talk not very much, and sometimes we talk loads. But yeah, there's life is sort of full of possibilities and it might not, what's out there ready or the resources might not fit your needs. So start something yourself.
No, because you're like a number of things you said there really resonate with me. Like being a business owner can be a lonely place, and for all the reasons that you said, who do you speak to and who do you discuss things with, and it often feels also that some of the issues that we face when we look at other businesses, we think, oh, actually, they don't look as though they're experiencing that. They look as though everything's fine for them and it's all rosy and everything's going. But actually, you realise when you talk to them that it's not always the case. And so I love the fact that you've got that, you realise that, but also you've gone out and created your own group. You've gone, okay, I want to be around like-minded people, and you've created your own group to do that. That's fantastic.
But that's quite a key point as well that you've just touched on is the transparency. I think that's another thing is if you can be open enough to talk to, like I did with this girl and said, look, I'm finding it quite hard on my own. Or, you know, if you can be that vulnerable, transparent, open with a closed group of people, it's just really, really helpful. And then, as you said, you start to find other people going, oh yeah, I'm struggling with that. And now I've got a few other businesses who I work with, but who I know I can be that open with, and they'll pick up the phone, they'll be like, oh, things are slow at the moment, and you're like, yes, I know, you know, it's really helps if you can be yeah, open with a select few.
Yeah, creating those, yeah, that like-minded group of people you can discuss things with, and I know from my experiences, you know, 'cause my day job is a coach, and yeah, creating those groups, the feedback that I get from people is exactly what you've sort of said there. Actually, you know, when we all meet up in a group environment, and they suddenly realise that not even being in the same industry, different industries, actually that industry's got the same issue or similar issues, or they experienced that 2 years ago and I'm experiencing it now. How did they deal with it, and how did they overcome it? It's invaluable, so invaluable. So great sharing there, Jules. Really
And
appreciate
I also feel like for me, any one person you can speak to, you're always going to get a piece of it. There's always something in there. As you said, that there'll be something in there, whether it triggers a thought that leads to a thought that leads to a good idea. But there's always one thing that somebody will give you, whether you realize it at the time or not. And it might even be that you never want to do that again. That could even be your takeaway. But also at the same time, I think when you're growing a brand, that's one extra person that knows about your brand. And that in itself is really valuable.
what you've just sort of referred to there. I refer to as BFOs. Okay, blinding flashes of the obvious. Okay, how I describe these things is you've got all this information swimming around in your head, and you know, at the moment you don't know what to do with it, and then somebody will say something, or you'll watch something, or you'll hear something, and what it does is it suddenly connects bits of information that you've got in your head, and you get that BFO, that light bulb moment, and you're like, I get it now, I know what to do.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. Some people you might speak to and get loads of stuff from. Others, it might be just that one thing that triggers those things in your head and go, yeah, that's it. So yeah, you're right. It's and that what you've just described there is the open mindset. You know, you get the fixed mindset and the open mindset. The open mindset is what you've just described there. Every conversation I have with somebody, I can learn something from. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know when I'm going to use it, but every conversation I have, I'm going to learn something from. That's a real open-minded sort of way of thinking. So I love that. And look, there's one question, Jules, that I'd always like to ask people that are kind enough to join me on this call, which is, what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you? So if you could go back and speak to yourself when you were 18, what would you say to yourself?
I would say write down all the things that you're good at. And from that, choose your top 5 and work out what careers can feed into that. And then go and get work experience, because the best way to learn is on the job. And often it's hard to get a job in that industry, or you've got no experience, etc. But if you offer yourself for free and you can show that you've got a good work ethos, you're hardworking, you're going to turn up on time, you're going to look presentable, represent their brand appropriately, then they will highly likely let you work for free. And if you can work out how that will benefit your end goal of doing your passion or your hobby or your interest for the rest of your life, then that's a great place to start.
I love that. And actually, one of the reasons I always ask this question is actually my daughter's older now, she's 19, but I love sharing these pieces of advice with her to sort of say, look,
yeah, nice.
Somebody said to me, and because look, we discussed this before we came on the call, you know, about with, you know, we've got children, and they don't tend to listen to the parents. They'll listen to what other people say.
Oh, yeah,
to me. So I go, I had a great tip that somebody shared with me today. Have a listen to this. So thank you for sharing that, Jules. I really appreciate that.
Not at all.
And what and I've mentioned this a couple of times on this sort of discussion that I've done with various people. And what that always brings to mind is the Japanese word ikigai. Have you ever heard of ikigai?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, where you've got the four circles and where they meet in the middle is your reason for being. And what you just described there was your ikigai, which is, okay, find something that you love, find something that you're good at, find something that the world needs, and find something that you get paid for.
Yeah.
If you can find all four of those things, you've found your reasons for being. And it sounds to me as though you've found your ikigai. You
I
found
have.
something you're
Yeah.
passionate about. You found something you're good at. You
Yeah.
found something the world needs because it needs this problem solved. And you can generate revenues from it as well. So I think it's great that you seem to have found your ikigai. And
Thanks.
well, look, Jules, thank you very much for joining us, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about your business, but also your journey as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.